All right, so we gotta talk because I thought this crap was fake. What am I talking about? Apparently, grown ass adults, Gen Z, this is a Gen Z thing. Way to go, Gen Z. Always doing this weird shit. Gen Z is some of them are taking their parents to job interviews. Why are you taking your parents with you to a job interview? This is stupid. If you are 18 plus, you should be doing your own shit as an adult. I don't care who you are. There's no excuse for it. And if you mentally can't handle going to an interview by yourself, you mentally can't handle doing said job, and that employer should just deny you. But let's do something different. We're going to watch YouTube together, all right? We're going to watch some videos on this subject, and let's see how long it takes for the media, the mainstream media, before we'll find a video where they're even allowing somebody to speak the opposition to this very clearly awful idea. And of course, everything has gotten worse since COVID. So they're going to blame COVID for this. It's like, no, you need to accept accountability for your own stupidity. But there are some arguments for it too. But let's go ahead and. Oh, let me fix that. Sorry. Now, screen capture. There. There we go. Should be able to see that. Let's add something else here that was supposed to be there. So, yeah, you're right. I haven't done this in a while. If you're thinking that, it's been a while since I did any sort of streaming. I did a little bit last night for the first time in forever, and it's gonna get better. There's a chat widget I'm trying to add. Chat box. There we go. Yeah. All right, that should be better now. Yeah, like I said, I'll make this better as we go along. But let's watch this video here. You have heard of bring your kid to work day. Let me make sure that's actually gonna work. Because you might not be hearing that. No? Alright. He's talking about how people, the younger people, are just they would rather stare at their screens and not say much. Now they're this is yeah, no, they're just making excuses for people who don't want to speak up. Oh, let no. We're taught they're saying that because these people were coming of age, so to speak, when they were, entering the workforce when they were in the middle of a pandemic where you just didn't get to go do those things. That's bullshit. You're making excuses for people who just need to learn this. Just like, you know, no, they have to learn how to do this like a normal fucking adult does. There is no excuse for bringing your. This is still not a valid reason to bring your parents because you don't know how to do a job interview. There's plenty of resources out there that will teach you how to do a job interview, how to go through and how to prepare for it. If you're going through a staffing company, some staffing companies actually have resources that'll teach you how to do this. But yeah, let's carry on with your bullshit, please. No, he's right. That's probably the only thing truthful that he's been about on here. Like that's good advice. The fuck is a tiger dad? I thought they were like this is a helicopter parent, but what? Let's see what Google says. What is a tiger dad? It says a tiger dad is a father who practices a strict parenting style known as tiger parenting. Tiger parents are known for being strict, micromanaging, and high expecting. They emphasize academic achievement and discipline and often withhold affection. Listen to everything this guy said so far. Listen to everything. He's doing this because it makes him look good to push his kid to do well. That's that's the kind of person that's advocating for letting your parents go to a jet. So it's very much in line with who he is as a person. you know, and the only thing we can't out of all of this, the only thing that we can't just determine for sure is if how much with affection he's withholding. But I don't know. I can't imagine he's giving too much of it. Like he's coming out in public and he's bragging about the way he raised his son. Yeah, I did this. I pushed him to do well and get good grades and blah blah blah. And like the real question is this really what, his kid wanted to do? Well, as long as he's making money, right? Anyway, Okay, I want to stop him right there. First off, parents should be involved in their kids' lives, sure. And just because they turn into an adult doesn't mean you just, all right, go away now. Just come by when you want to say hi. I'll see you at Christmas type thing. No, that's not how it works. But that doesn't mean go in and do everything for your kids to. No, I have look. I have some issues with anxiety. My late teens and early 20s were ridden with issues where I didn't go do certain things because I couldn't motivate myself to go do them. Just like these kids can't motivate themselves to go, I don't know, to a job interview by themselves. And fortunately, I didn't have that problem, but the problem that I had was in other areas. Like I didn't fight hard enough to stay on some sort of health insurance. That I regret that later, but the point is, it's the same thing. It's no different. The difference between my experience and what's happening here is that I had to sink or swim. I did without because I was raised by somebody who was raising me to be an adult. So I reaped the consequences of not doing the things that I was supposed to do. Just like you have these parents taking their kids to job interviews in the hopes that they get the job, and that doesn't work. Yes, there's companies that'll hire your kid if you show up to an interview with them because they're that desperate for people. But if they have first pick on who they're going to hire, as a manager, I would rather take the person who I might need to work with a little more that showed up by themselves than the person who is 100% qualified, but because they couldn't show up to the interview by themselves, my concern is that their parents are going to be involved throughout their entire journey with them working at my company. I don't want to open up that can of worms. It's stressful enough managing people, and then to sit there and have to wonder, is this idiot going to be bringing in, their parents every single time they get a write up, every single time they what's going to happen. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It coddling children, protecting them from stress, and just reality. Life sucks. It's hard. We're not immortal. We're not. Most of us are one or two paychecks away from being homeless, and that's a scary reality, and that's why you got to prepare your kids the right way, so hopefully they don't ever experience that kind of problem. um, yeah, the emotional stunning, yeah, you're right, you're absolutely right. You can't shield somebody, a kid growing up, and I'm somebody who my upbringing was a little messed up in certain ways. If you know me, you know me, but if you don't, the part that's relevant here is that, again, it goes back to there were things that I was supposed to do that, like cleaning my room. If I didn't do that and I let it go, and if I could learn to tolerate being griped at, which to me was far easier to get yelled at every single night for the course of a week or two before my mom would just clean my room for me. And that's an example of something, I had to get better at as an adult. Um, but the issue is, no, you can't shield your kids from reality. Consequences, failure, these are the best teachers. And that's part of it with a job interview. You go into a job interview, it's a test. A job interview is a real life test. It's not an open book test. You can say that school didn't prepare you for things, but once you start realizing it actually did prepare you for certain ideas like closed book tests. You know, like going to a job interview is very much like taking a final exam, and you have to have prepared yourself the right way to get to where you know how to handle yourself, you know how to answer questions, you've prepared yourself. Unfortunately, there's not, it's gotten a lot better because the proliferation of information on the internet, it's so much easier now to go out. You can go to YouTube, watch videos like mine. Turn me off, go if go watch somebody that's actually going to teach you how to prepare for a job interview if that's what you want to do. But, it's out there. There's no excuse to not, to go out there and do it. It's not like it was when, I was a kid growing up where you had to wait till you could get to a computer and hope that, you're at some place that had internet. Most of us nowadays walk around with a internet connected computer in our pockets that's more powerful than what our first computer would have been, right? And that's why there's no excuse. That's why, if we're talking generational issues, why we have an issue where older generations are still the type to go to a gas station, for example, and ask for directions rather than whip out their phone, go to Google Maps, and, find out where they're supposed to go and push the button that says navigate, and it's a GPS navigator, and it tells you turn by turn in real time with you, you know. But if you don't know how to use that tool, you're still going to go into the gas station. Hey, I'm trying to get to this place. And yeah, anyway. I'm a millennial, and I recognize that there are people who don't behave like adults, and I won't accommodate that. Go on. They do, and it is. Why are we blaming COVID for being stupid? What the hell, man? He's sitting here saying this whole thing has been about we had a virus, we had COVID. You know what happened with COVID for like the workforce? You really want to know why they're having problems? Most of it's the company's faults, by the way. Um, First off, piss poor management decisions that were leaning a lot of companies pre-COVID, right before COVID, that should have put them under. All COVID did was speed up the death of some of these companies that should have been dealing with consequences. But, not everybody that suffered deserved it, sure. But, look, they sent people home, and then there for a while we had remote work was starting to become more prevalent. And I work remotely. I am a huge advocate. I've tried to work remotely as much as I can for the last 10, 12 years, and it's obviously got a nice work-life balance, but not every job can be remote. Like you're still going to need somebody to take your order at the restaurant and bring your food to the table and somebody to cook the food. You can't do that at home, not legally anyway. But, so we go to, they make let everybody work remote because that's the only way they're going to be able to get day-to-day stuff done because I don't know, offices are really bad to go to, right? No, and the answer to that is no to that too. But so what happened was a lot of people realized that the jobs that they did could be 100% executed remotely. And I'm for it. I'm for it, okay? If you're running a company and you have a job that can be done remotely, that means that you can cast a wider net for your talent search. But not everybody looks at it that way. There's another perspective with the remote workforce, and that some of these companies are getting subsidies from their local government where their office is, for the purpose of, we're going to cut you a huge tax break as long as you keep your building busy and keep drawing business to our community. We'll cut you a tax break. So they have an obligation to not let their building sit empty if they do decide to transfer to, or convert to a more remote role. And that's a problem in its own, but they don't sit there and tell you, well, those companies will not shoot it straight to you. You just have to figure out that if they're big enough, that's probably what's going on. So yeah. Anyway, let's go back. No, we're not. So, and then when they called people back to COVID, sorry, ADD, ADHD is a fucking nightmare sometimes. But so you have, now they are calling people back, and this is something that's been going on for the last, since 2023. Companies have been trying to get people to come back. They want people to come back into the office. They're telling people in those 2 years that have been there for less than those 2 years that, yeah, we hired you for a remote job, but we really need you to switch to start coming to our office, to relocate. Maybe they're states away. You're in Arkansas, we're in California. You got to come out here, and or you'll have to find another job. And it's like, unfortunately, that's happening, and there's really not a whole lot anybody can do about it. But yeah, these companies, they're playing all sorts of shit. And yeah, I do feel that COVID has woke up a lot of people to the realities of the workforce and how companies hire. Um, Companies were abusing funds to hire people, or tax funds rather, and they were putting jobs out that were never meant to be filled. Because if they sit there and if the government's giving them, I don't know, $10,000, um, then they can take that money and use it to upgrade their parking lot. But before they can fix their parking lot with that money, they, they got to prove that they couldn't hire a qualified applicant. So, you know, and that's something that's become way more common since COVID as well. And they're still abusing that. There's people. We're going into 2025 and the shit's still happening. People are trying to get a job and they're realizing that a lot of these jobs that they apply to don't even get a fuck you back. But, you know, there's no way to prove that. No, 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 no. You're right. He's right. People are going to come in with their parents, whether we as, you know, companies, and I'm just speaking in that context, they're going to come in regardless of what, you know, because look, people show up to job interviews like dressed like crap, and that's something that has to be brought up too. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, so looking on Facebook, somebody had posted and commented that they went to a job interview last month. Dress code was business casual. First off, there's a lot increasing number of Gen Zers that don't seem to know these different types of dress, right? You know, business casual is different than business formal. Business casual is not the same thing as just straight casual. You know, your street clothes, that's casual, you know, blue jeans, sweatpants, t-shirts. You know, the way I'm dressed right now, this is just simply casual, not business casual. But yeah, so you should, yeah, and I dial that back a little bit. Business casual can be good jeans. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. I get into that argument with people a lot, but if it's good jeans that are in good condition, they're clean, they're not stained, they're not faded, those actually look very good with a polo shirt. Um, yep, tucked in polo shirt. Gen Zer showed up in a pair of light gray sweatpants with stains in it and a blank spaghetti strap tank top with bleach stains. She failed her drug test, and this company allows you to have weed in your system. It doesn't test for THC. I swear this world. Somebody dressed like that's probably on, I would guess, meth or heroin. If you're going to show up to a job interview that ill prepared, that just shows how little regard you have for. No, you can't sit there and say that, oh, they can't afford this or that or the other. There are so many charities. Even if you don't have a penny to your name, there are churches that have charity programs you can walk into on certain days or call them any day they're open and say, hey, I'm trying to get my life together. I don't have anything appropriate for work, for a job interview. Could you help me with something that would look professional in a job interview? And then, of course, that depends on the kind of job. But again, these programs exist, these charities exist. There's no excuse to walk into a place unprepared like that, like to be that bad off. But to fail a drug test, yeah, that's something that happens a lot more than people would like to admit. That's true. That's better than what they could be doing. But they're still waiting for a handout. They're just going to the interview with their hands held out, like, "Look, mommy's here." Like I see you walk into my conference room where I'm conducting an interview, and somebody that's not the applicant. The only way that I would accept that arrangement would be if it's a translator of some sort. You know, not just in the context of, you know, languages, foreign languages, but even somebody that's deaf that needs an interpreter to talk. And that's probably something that's, you know, yeah, you know, and that would be acceptable too. That's a different story, but that's not their, and that could be their parent. It could be a parent. I mean, you get the help you can get. You know, I don't judge people with disabilities like that, but no, if you go in, don't show up with any more people than you're will, you know, than wouldn't be there on the job with you. That's the piece that they don't typically say in school or any sort of, you know, preparations for job interviews, because it's just understood, and this clown here is using that fact and everything else to justify why he thinks it's okay. And I can't remember if he already said this or we're about to hear him but I watched this video, none of the others, but I watched the other one earlier, this one earlier rather, and he did admit that he walked into, you know, he took his son to his job to that job interview at ABC. So this guy works for ABC, his son works for ABC now. He walked in and I want to listen to something because I want you to notice something. Look who is who this is. This is from ABC News. This video is about to end. Let me This is what I'm talking about. Let's watch this till the end now. There's 10 seconds left. I'll try not to stop you guys. Yeah, guess what? They cut it off right at the end because they didn't want somebody else to come on and talk about the opposite opinion of this. They just wanted their narrative. This is something that no matter what you do in life, if you're watching any sort of media, to pay attention to when they cut shit off, because if they're cutting shit off right here, they may have went on more. The part they want you to see the most, and all they did was they just sat there and let this guy talk about, oh, this is something that's happened since COVID. You know, the times have changed, and don't get me wrong. Back to the employer side of things, it is harder to find qualified staff now because COVID woke a lot of people up to things like wages, more of the details, the nitty gritty with their day to day. So people do ask a lot more questions now in interviews. Um, but they're very, people are very, I don't know what the word is, but they're aware that they can dissect a job posting and figure out if this is a company that is worth their time or not. A lot of smaller companies can't pay like the bigger companies, and people get hung up on what a big company can do for you. And the reality is, even if you work at a big giant company like I did for Caterpillar, um, you may not ever be a direct employee of that company. I was never. I've always worked through their suppliers, so I was working for a smaller company that had to do what they could to provide a pay, and it was always very clearly less than what the job should be paid. But because there's a middleman, the middleman has to take their cut, and this is something that you're going to see all across, the entire everything. The whole world does it this way. Um, Let's see what the View has to say. That ought to be hilarious. Yes, they do. Half of them? Oh, that's all right. That is exactly where we were going with this. I may not agree with everything that woman says, but that much is no, that the disbelief, the shock, everything, she's complete. No, she's right here, okay? Like, this is insane because you need to, most companies that I've interviewed for, if you're going in, they tell you what the dress code is for the interview, and generally the rule of thumb is that you dress for the job. So if it's just a tech support job, you don't go into, you know, the place wearing a suit unless you're, I don't know, applying to be the manager. That's a different story, I guess. But oh my God. And then half of them, they're either, like she's saying, they're either dressing wrong, they're bringing their parent with them, or they're asking for money that is not reasonable for the job. Yeah, I think I think we could all agree that most of us would be absolutely better off with 100,000 a year. If that's all we ever got, and we got it just for existing, we'd have no motivation to work. But no, look, like you can't sit there and yeah, oh my god. Hell no, you better not. Yup. All right, yes, that was right. That was spot on. That was no, why? Unless the parent is coming, like I said before, unless the parent is supposed to work this job with them, there's no reason for them both to come to the same interview. Have I worked at the same place as one of my parents? Sure. I don't even think our interviews were together. I think our interviews and stuff were separate. Actually, he was there a week before I was. That's what happened. Anyway, let's walk the next coffee talk. They're in St. Louis. There we go. I didn't want to hear about their dog. Yeah. Oh my god. That's yeah, so far the only thing that only one that we watched, and I'm trying to make sure I pick the ones that are put out by the mainstream media, but like this is yeah, their parents coming with what the fuck? What the fuck? Because recent college graduates are Gen Z. They're young. They're under 25, most likely, and these are the exact ones that are showing up to job interviews dressed inappropriately. They show up with their parents because they just don't want to do anything by themselves. And don't get me wrong, okay? There are companies that are so desperate for workers that they turn the interview into what's really a sales meeting. And you know the first sign that this is what's going on is if it's a group interview. Every single one of those that I've been to, just because I went to them out of curiosity, I knew it was a bad idea, but I had nothing better to do that day, so I'd go. And yeah, now they're doing them on Zoom. By the way, that was terrible. I left the one that I did. It turned into it was a sales thing to try and get people to take a loan out to take a class, and I for like $6,000 to $8,000. Like I'm sure it was probably decent, but nowhere in there did I feel that there was going to be a guaranteed job. So, you know, they turn, there's a lot of places that do this, and so I can understand why somebody might want their parents on the interview with them, because when you're older, the sort of thing that I've learned as I've gotten older is you do become more aware of the things that these companies are doing that they absolutely should not be doing. Um, and they'll use high pressure sales tactics, they'll use psychological tricks, they'll do all sorts of things to draw your attention away from the man behind the curtain, so to speak, so you don't actually see through the fact that maybe you were just interviewed for a scam. And that's, there was a company that I interviewed for many years ago that I can't remember the name of the company. I can't even remember what city I had to drive to do it. I feel like, you know, it wasn't as close as I wanted it to be, but whatever. And I'd even accepted the job. So I went. I go through this process. There was a group interview, then there was a one-on-one interview because they have to weed out the people that give them a chance to walk away, and those are the smart ones that walk away. And then they go into the next wave of idiots, and they eventually they're like, all right, first day on the job. They didn't tell me this. It's like I knew it was door to door, and I'm like, and I show up, I dress for the weather, you know. Next day they're like, oh well, you need to wear a suit and tie. It's like, first off, you didn't say that to me at all during the interview that I was supposed to be out in whatever the weather was, going door to door selling crapola. Don't get me wrong, I like selling crapola. That wasn't the problem, but it was like as soon as they're like, wear a suit, and there wasn't even a salary, it was commission. So if I didn't sell anything that day, I didn't eat that day. And it's like, yeah, that's not how life works, guys. You shouldn't be, and that's that. I feel very strongly about companies that hire salespeople 1099 only and only commission only. And it's just, why are you expecting some full time effort out of somebody that you're not paying them to be there full time? That's Most people are going to walk away, so companies have to find better ways of doing it. And, but that's one about the only reason why I could think of a legitimate reason why somebody might want, not actually take them, but might be like, man, it would be so nice if they could just sit next to me and just make sure that these guys don't do any dumb shit. It's a would be nice thing, but it's not reality. Uh, there are certain people you don't hire because you can tell outright that they're going to be a liability, they're going to be a potential legal liability on top of that, but they're going like these are the kind of people that are most likely to sue the company, and because their parents are willing to go to interviews with them and there's a good chance that that parent has a good job that might even make more than you do, and they could very well be the type that, oh, you're not giving them enough hours, and that then you wind up with like letters from lawyers, and it's like, no, we're cutting back everybody's hours because blah blah blah, because business needs dictated. It's unnecessary drama. Like, nobody needs that shit. If you're not performing right and you're getting written up at work for poor performance, then you got somebody like these kids. And kids, that's what they are. They're not grown up if they're acting like that way. They're not, point blank. And yeah, it's drama nobody fucking needs. I don't care if somebody shows up. You are hiring a potential lawsuit trap. Unless you know for a fact the parents are poor shit too. But I don't think those are the parents going to interviews with people, because those are the ones that are at work. Yes, okay, that's fine. That's different if your parents are taking you to the job interview as your transportation, because not every job requires you to have your own transportation. You know, that makes sense to me, but they just don't go into the interview. Like, again, and it all depends on where you live, but there are places where mass transit is effective and thorough, and proper preparation will teach you how to use that and almost never have a problem. I say almost because there's all sorts of things that can mess up the buses, but if you play your cards right, you'll be all right. But you don't necessarily have to have your own set of wheels, but a lot of companies like that, and a lot of companies expect that. A lot of companies will flat out look you straight in the eye and say, "I know your mom brought you here, but you do have your own set of wheels, right?" And because again, you're young, you probably don't have that much money. Your parents are the ones at work. You're trying to save gas. Hey, mom, can you take me to this job interview so I don't know, use my own gas? Yeah, sure. So all of that can be legit. Like, it's completely fine, and there's, mom and dad can take you, but they can't participate. Yeah, and the curb is really important, because that doesn't mean sit there and sit in their lobby, because now you're okay. That was annoying. Yeah, no, like, you don't want to go in to let your as a parent, if you're taking your kid to an interview, you don't just go in and make yourself, a patron of that business, especially if it's not one that typically has patrons that come in and sit around. You know, like, if your kid's interviewing at Starbucks, you can go somewhere else and not draw attention to yourself, because that's just embarrassing for your kid that one of you or both of you is out there just waiting for you to get done. Like, I see a family sitting with one person coming back for an interview, and if it's the kid that's the one that's like, yeah, if, there's no excuse for that. Don't do that. You drop your kid off, you go somewhere else up, a mile or two up the road or across the lot or whatever, or go sit in the car and wait. Whatever you do, don't go in, because you're going to wreck things for your kid, because you want them to get that job. You don't want them to, yeah. You don't want to stunt their progress and showing up. And yeah, I like that last one. I'm just looking up to see what KMOV in St. Louis actually is. It's CBS affiliated, so that was a little bit of a surprise. But yeah, ABC, there's a whole thing out there where you can look up bias. Let's find that. Yeah, let's not do that. Let's watch another video. 26% of Gen Z invite parents to job interview. Okay, this ought to be good. Not mainstream media, but this guy sounds good, so we'll see what he has to say. That's fucking embarrassing. Why? Why are you going in with your kids to these interviews? Why? From the perspective of a hiring manager, one of the things that most companies want to see in an employee or a potential employee is somebody who is independent. Somebody who, if you're the only one, I don't know, working the front, you know how to take care of the customers and you're not afraid to do that until I don't know, somebody else comes in or a manager gets done doing whatever the manager's doing, like there's no. You got to be independent. You've got to be independent. You've got to be able to, you know, function. And if you're showing up to an interview that just tells me you're not independent, you're codependent, you need mommy or daddy or both of them to be around all the time in order for you to do something very basic like a job interview. And that's just a huge fucking turnoff. Don't, no. And when I started this about a month ago, there was somebody in a group that I was in that I couldn't tell if they were trolling, and they may yet have still been trolling, just because of the kind of group it was in. But it might not have, it might have been real. And if my memory serves me right, it was a lady that was saying that she was taking her son to multiple job interviews, her 19-year-old son to job interviews, and eventually he got a job supposedly. And it's like, yeah, because you probably scared the shit out of the person doing the interview. You found a job at a company. Your kid found a job at a company where you probably had more influence on the hiring process than your kid even knows, because I don't know, maybe they don't know that you went to school with the district manager, for example. Like there's all sorts of things that these people aren't openly admitting to, but there's still a lot of people that have a fierce personality that you come across the right kind of, the timid kind of person, right? Um, like not every manager is as prepared or as strong personality wise as you would think, because they're bosses aren't all these immortal beings that can put up with whatever, and they just write you up or fire you if you're bad enough. Like that's no, they're humans too, and they have differing abilities. So some bosses that are able to manipulate into leaving favorable notes on the interview sheet, and you get broadcasting places like ABC, and a lot of these. I'm glad that most of the videos I've watched are people ridiculing this, because it's supposed to be. There's no way to take this seriously. I don't care if they show up with you know their parents, or they show up late, or they show up dressed wrong. Send them home. Do not give them another chance unless, oh, but you can apply again in 6 months. That's, that tells them, all right, you're going to have to figure this out because 6 months down the road, maybe by then you've found a better job, but maybe by then you've also at least figured out that, hey, I did something really stupid. Because if your kids, the problem is if you're so worried that your kids don't know how to step into a job interview and do a job interview correctly, just because they do it correctly doesn't mean they'll get the job. Um, like sometimes there's certain jobs have different, you know, ins and outs to them, right? And people with different employment experience, different backgrounds, and can be a better fit for a job, even if they don't have, the experience, you know, in that particular job or field. Because with the work that I do, I bring people into tech all the time um, that have never worked tech before because the particular job doesn't need you to be technically oriented in order to do it. But if you come in with some sort of aptitude, some sort of, hey, you've got this skill and it's a technology that we use, then all of a sudden now you've catapulted yourself to the front because I want to hire somebody that can move up. I want to hire somebody that is capable of understanding some of the other work that we do. And that's what happens, right? Let's see here. Enough of me, right? This is a failure of the parents, and you cannot make up for it by going to a job interview with your kid and sitting next to them. You cannot make up for what you failed as a parent. You want to go through and prepare your kids for an interview, you can do a better job. You know what? There's companies that do mock interviews. Maybe you know somebody that's a manager somewhere that might be willing to help you prepare for your first or even second job. Like maybe you worked a job and this is the first job that you got fired from and you don't know how to bounce back from. That's a legitimate reason to reach out for help. That's something that a lot of people, the first time they're faced with that problem, how do you proceed with that, right? And you know, yeah, it sucks because by the time you start getting those interviews, by the time you start applying, it's embarrassing to admit that you got fired because in your mind you might be thinking, you know, they want to know why I'm the best candidate for the job, but I couldn't even do the same job somewhere else. That's why you get fired from something else. You go into so say you couldn't handle fast food, go apply to call center jobs. Try a call center job. Eventually you'll find something that you're good at, that you're comfortable with, and the more things that you're exposed to, you can teach yourself a lot of stuff. You don't have to go to college anymore. Um, it helps, sure, depending on what your goals are. But like if you're just trying to get a job and pretty much most of the STEM options, science, technology, engineering, and uh, mechanics, I think is the last one, mechanical engineering. But I don't know, math. I work with so many acronyms, I can't keep them all straight. But no, like if you're going into anything STEM, um, there's a lot of opportunities for people to learn how to do things on your own. You can go to courses, company or websites rather, like udemy.com. And if you want to learn how to, and this isn't, I'm not shilling for them at all. This is just a site, a company that I've used for years, and I know they're good. But like, if you want to learn, AI, like this is, you learn the categories. AI has to do with data science. All right, cool. For $89, you can take this class for how to do, work with Chat GPT and generative AI, and that's a premium course. It's a good deal, but the other thing that I like to point out is pay attention to this. You can get a lot of these courses. In fact, I have yet to see one. I bet you that $89 class you can take for $15. It doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have. You can get education. You can gain new skills. You can practice things. Go take a job that you don't like because it means money, and you take some of that money and you invest in things. Like if you wanted to learn how to do web design, you would need to make sure you have a computer. Most people have that, but you know, you might have, and not a fucking Chromebook either. Although you can do certain stuff with Chromebooks now, but listen, you need a computer, you need software. So the courses go through just like a regular college class. Here's the tools that you'll need to do the things that I'm trying to teach you, right? They'll go over text editors and just the software, the tools. They'll give you tips like here's a free tool, but when you make a little money, here's a paid one that does a million things more that'll make your life a lot easier when you can afford it. And that's what a lot of these courses go over, because these are people who are experts in that field. That's why they're teaching them. They could be somebody like me who's worked with WordPress since 2008, teaching a class about WordPress because it's something that I know very well or they know very well. That's an example of a way to get your leg up and make up. And so just like that, they have classes on Udemy, and I'll show you. Let's go back there. Search for anything, right? Job prep. Python developer job interview prep. That's a good job. That's a good job to get into. That would absolutely be worth paying $50 to take a course to teach you how to prepare. Because when you're preparing for a developer's job, they do other things. There's coding challenges, there's exercises. They make you prove you know how to write in that code. So if you don't know that language intimately, you're probably not going to get that job. Job search, resume, interview prep, masterclass for $54.99. This is good. This is something for if you want to help your kid prepare for a job. This right here, Christmas is right around the corner. For $55, it's a 3.5 hour long course. It looks like with 3.5 hours of video, which is about right. And this is the way you help your kid, okay? If you can't do it yourself, or maybe you're perpetually unemployed yourself, and maybe you both take the course together, and they go over things, the phone interview, controlling your environment, and using. You know what? I'm gonna, yeah, we're gonna put this link in there because that looks like an outstanding class. Yeah, I'm gonna put that in my I'm gonna make sure it's in the YouTube description before we're done here, or after we're done here, because I'm not putting it in now. But I'm leaving that tab open so I don't forget. Let's go back. This is exactly what the first guy was talking about when he was talking about how there's this discrepancy, this difference in the way he was raised to communicate versus how the Gen Z was raised to communicate. Well, there's very much their eyes are on the screen. They're looking at their phone because they don't know anything else, right? Like their parents were lazy. Instead of taking them places, doing things, interacting with them, it was, oh, well, me and the boys are playing Call of Duty. Hey, little Johnny, here's an iPad. I downloaded some games for you to try out. And then they eventually get older, and then they start experimenting with social media. And anyway, their whole life, their eyes, to them, life involves there being this screen. And so you know, we don't adapt to them. They have to adapt to reality. This isn't always going to be there. And, you know, it's not a replacement for social skills, no matter how much. And again, the parents have failed their kids this way, and they don't want to acknowledge that I fucked up. I should have been there instead of the iPad. Not that there's anything wrong with an iPad or a phone. Like, there's a balance and you have to teach that balance, but if you don't know that balance yourself, you can't teach your kid that balance. And that I think is where the failure starts. 100%, full stop. That's the parents. That's what's wrong. That's what I've been saying all along. And again, you can't make up for it by going to the interview or doing things for your kid that they're supposed to be doing themselves. Now, is it fine to be aware that maybe they need to be prepared for something? Yeah, that's called being a parent. You're supposed to prepare them for things, not live their life for them. Look, there are legitimate work arrangements where the employee has somebody that stands in and kind of helps them with those things. But that's because we're talking people who are special needs. We're not talking about capable, mentally capable, albeit ill prepared, but mentally and physically capable people of doing things independently and learning trial and error and hitting the walls and getting fired or getting written up for the first time, right? You can't shield your kid from consequence because the longer you try, the worse it's going to be for them and when they, as soon as they cut loose. um, like I said, there were a lot of things I didn't get to do growing up, especially in the area of socialization. I was smothered, and so I used the opportunity when I got out of the house. um, I think I moved out at like 21, 22, somewhere between that phase of my life, right? Because I know I was still living at home when I got my first drop of liquor right when I turned 21. So, yeah, I think I moved out by 22. But the point is, I got my social outlet and my exploration. I made mistakes as a 20 something that I should have been able to make as a teen. And, so I've always felt that I'm about 10 years behind my peers in terms of social development. And that's something that I think I've made up for it, but you know, that's the thing. Like that's what's happening. These parents are doing to them, to a worse degree what was done to me. And it's all well intentioned. Don't get the wrong idea here. Every parent who does this most of the time anyway, they have their kid's best interest at heart, but they're using their heart to compute something that the brain should be doing instead, which is this is your kid's job interview and your kid needs to be there by themselves and you need to make sure they're prepared. You do that by taking them to job hiring events. You do that by helping them find, and you pick them out yourself. Go find YouTube videos. You don't have to spend $55 to learn all of these things. With a little bit of elbow grease, you can go to YouTube and you could find videos for each of these topics and kind of roll your own if you really don't want to spend the money or can't afford to spend the money. I don't know what your situation is, but yeah, there are legitimate alternatives. Uh, there are workshops that a lot of companies and colleges have to help people build a resume. There's videos. So many resources nowadays. There's no excuse that you shouldn't be trying to push your kid into doing things on their own. We're talking about a kid that's used to staring at a screen to look stuff up. If they can sit there and use it to play Fortnite or watch other people play Fortnite or whatever game it is, they can use the same search bar that I use here on YouTube.com to find stuff up or find stuff out to learn how to do something. They have this access to the same thing that the rest of us do. There is no excuse that they shouldn't be able to prepare themselves. If they know they haven't been, they know they haven't been. Oh, mom, dad, would you come with me? Yeah, no. I could understand that being a thing, okay? Somebody that's even 18, honestly, if they just turned 18, they're still a kid by most people's standards, okay? And that might be their first job. That's your call. If you're going to show up to an interview, make sure you do it once. And and it better be because they're a minor. You can justify. I could understand if I'm interviewing a 16-year-old that if his parents felt the need to come with, I would completely probably. That's a different situation all in itself because the issue that I have is if your child is an adult and has work experience of any amount, there is no reason that that parent should even want to come to that interview. It's like, no, you lost the last job. You can get yourself another job. Like you're not trying to don't shield your kid from his consequences, from his piss poor choices. You're not teaching them anything. They get fired from a job. All right, all right. Let's sit down. Let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about what you did. If you really want my help, let's talk about what happened so you don't do it again. Not going into a company and bitching because they didn't get that happened to me too. I say my mom, but it was really my great aunt that raised me. I called her mom, so that's who I'm talking about. Um, but I had went in to apply at a computer place that had just opened up, and I was the one that introduced a friend to it, right? He got the job instead of me. He would never have found that if it wasn't for me. He might have. It was a small town, but yeah, he went in. I went in there, and it's like, and I had just gotten fired from a computer shop down the street, and that may have played a lot into it. But it was absolute garbage. Like this was me accepting consequences. And I talked in detail about why I got fired at my last job with that particular boss. Like I remember we were standing out in front of the shop, out right outside, facing the parking lot, sitting talking, because I had posted, without saying names, but I had described a situation on a public forum that I was operating that had to do with tech knowledge. And anyway, my boss had found it and fucking hated the fact that I had an opinion of him. And it's like, I invited you to that because I wanted you to see that. I didn't speak behind your back. I said the shit and then said, guess what I said? This is a long pattern for me of who I am as a person. I had a falling out with a friend of, or what I thought was a friend of roughly 20 or more years, right, this year. And I did a thing that I normally would not have done, but he was describing the effects of it, and I said, "Oh, that's because of me, because I'm the one that said something to that person. That's why they're having this problem with you. I'm the one that opened my mouth." And I had to say that like two or three times before he finally it's like, no, I don't do anything that I'm not willing to own up to. So if it's good, if it's bad, I'm flat out. I'm gonna be the one to tell you, yeah, I did it, and I'm gonna do it again if you don't correct what you've done, because I can't stand what you've done. It just depends on the situation, right? But yeah, you don't just because that's something, like I said, nobody wants to deal with a pissed off parent of an employee. I was 19 at the time, and there was no excuse for her to go in and do that. I didn't even know she was going to do it until after she said, "Well, I went into that shop and told that business owner what I thought of him." And she couldn't stand my friend because he got the job instead of me. And that's, to me, I don't think that hurt the friendship, but because we talked about, because yeah, I didn't ask her to do that. So no, that friendship ended too. Which, by the way, I keep most of my friends. It's just a few people. People are meant to come and go. Okay, it's not unusual. The older I get, the easier it is to cope with it. Um, a friend lost was never a friend to begin with, is a saying that I've heard, and echoes through my head. And this is the important thing to realize. It's only 26%, which is still a high percentage. So on the flip side, most Gen Z aren't doing this because they're not stupid. But there's a huge number of what used to be something that was under, no more than maybe under 10%. We'll just say it was under 10%. Because this isn't something that's completely new. People have went to interviews with their kids for a long time, but usually because their kids are still kids, not because they're adults and they're You know, they're like a good example of this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, around that era. There was this, and you can still find his videos on YouTube by other people, but someone called Tourette's guy, and it was this guy that supposedly had Tourette's, and then if you know Tourette's guy, you know Tourette's guy, but there was a video that where they go to a job interview, right? And it's for his son, which is probably like 16 or 17 at the time, I think. And so they go into this interview and they make, but again, their whole shtick was videos, and that might not have been a real interview. Like, I feel that was staged and set up. Like, why would a janitor walk in into the middle of an interview just to get mad because somebody took a nasty crap in the toilet? And wasn't even and it was the dad, it wasn't the kid being interviewed. Like, that's an example of how to screw your kid over. Like, if you I remember later on in that video towards the end, I think they said that he didn't get the job. And gee, you wonder why? Yeah, I've worked with a lot of people in Gen Z, and they've been absolutely awesome. Like, I have had the pleasure of working with people from Gen Z that are good at their jobs, they're professional, they take their job seriously. So it isn't a generational failure by any means, but yeah, like, it's just what we're saying is the greatest chance of, if somebody is showing up to an interview with their parents, chances are it's Gen Z. So that's a side effect of these, the way the job market's changed. I feel legitimately that we're going to start seeing more and more freelancers, more and more self-employed people uh, taking over, and instead of companies hiring teams of web developers and designers and whatnot, they're just going to hire contractors. They're going to go out to Upwork or Fiverr and pay people to just do complete a job and be done with it. If you hire contractors to do the work, then well, you can you save a lot on liability. You don't have to pay their insurance. You don't have to pay any of their taxes. You just pay your taxes. You pay Fiverr. You pay Upwork. That just looks like it's an expense line to Fiverr, to Upwork, not even directly to an individual person. That relationship, that granularity happens between the platform and that particular freelancer. Not for you to worry about. I could go pay somebody on Fiverr right now $300, make a website, and that's it. One wham bam, thank you, ma'am, we're done. No obligation to them. No. And I think that's going to be a trend, though. I think people are starting to wake up and realize that there's a lot of these jobs that should be remote, that again, we go back to companies that are trying to bring people back to the office, and sometimes maybe it's because their hands are forced because of the tax breaks that they're getting, that there were strings attached to those, and so they have to use those buildings, and they have to, whether they want to or not. you know that's because that's going to drive people from thinking, I'll work for a company that does web design, versus, why don't I just be self-employed, set my prices, because you can make more money doing that if you get really good. If all, so, the nice thing about, for example, for web design is a really good example of of a remote job that could be done 100% remote, right? Using a laptop, you need software to do it, and you need an internet connection, and it doesn't even have to be a good internet connection. It's the same, and you can pull off a lot with um, customer service jobs where you're wearing a headset and you're talking and you're answering phone calls, you're answering tickets and emails and chats and things of that nature can almost always be done remotely unless your job has a desk side component to it, desk side support. If you're expected to go to that person's desk, obviously you can't do that remotely. And you know that's how a lot of newer jobs are being rolled up now, is they're including an immutable aspect of the job that makes it to where you can't do it remotely. Like I was working for a major manufacturer, and almost all of the job, in terms of the support side, could have been done remotely, but the purpose of that role was to be on site to provide that desk side support. So the jobs like that are what's starting to show up more often. Although that particular job was always like that at that company. There was never a time where that role was, you know. But yeah, but you can have, companies have to reach for straws, and they're like, oh, we have in-person meetings, or we do this in person, or we have team building exercises, all sorts of excuses to bring people back. So the response is, I want to be a web designer. I don't want to work in an office. I know how to do this, so I'm going to go out to a place like Fiverr. I'm going to go up to Upwork. I'm going to go to Craigslist. I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to email. I'm going to find some web design work, right? And it'll snowball. It'll roll. You just got to be careful. And eventually you get to where you're able to do this full time on your own, making better money than being somebody's employee. And you set the terms on everything pretty much. And that's what he's talking about. There is going to be a shift. That is something Gen Z is getting right. First off, any company that opens up any service, any product, it's meant to solve a problem. So an entrepreneur typically creates those. So it's not new concepts here that entrepreneurs solve problems. That's why they get paid. That's exactly what I was saying. That's exactly what I was saying. Like, they realize that there's a better way to do, and I've had this mileage in my own life where there's certain kinds of work that I wanted to do, and if you know me, you know that I have opened and closed businesses, um, and yeah, for me to do the kind of work I want to do, I pretty much have to give me that kind of work. The fact that that recently changed and I'm actually working somewhere doing a thing I genuinely like, which is what I would want to, do, is an anomaly that I hope I don't screw up. But listen, like, most people don't get that. Most of the time, it's what I've found is, if you want to go out and go do, and this sort of stuff made me cocky, okay? Like, I had this attitude with when I was living in Illinois that, back home, I didn't care if I got fired because I could look that boss straight in the eye and say, I don't need your permission to put food on the table. I can go out and sign into this freelance website and start taking work tomorrow. That's happened. That's absolutely happened. I mean, and you build relationships on that. True story. Back in 2011, I had just gotten fired from a job, help desk job that, you know, I liked it, but I hated it. It was one of those things. And, I had, and I've always had extra cell phones laying around. Like, they're usually not all active, but so there was this one that I hadn't put money on in a year. It was a prepaid phone from Virgin Mobile. You guys remember them, right? Well, so I charge it up and turn it on, and I was just sitting there playing with it because I hadn't used it in a while, and I liked the phone. It was kind of neat, and all of a sudden the thing rings. I had service. It took a few more months after that before it finally started making me pay for it, but the point was I was paying like $10 a month anyway. It's not like I didn't have the money. It was $10 a month for like 300 minutes, which for what I bought it for, the only reason I had that was so I'd have an extra, a dedicated phone for like business use. That was the only reason that I had that phone. Well, one day it was the day after I got fired, and I this phone rang and I picked it up, and it was some guy that I had. It was actually just down the road from where I was staying. That I had fixed his computer like a year prior. Like, he kept my phone number. Like, he kept it longer than I kept it. But like, yeah, I didn't go out and make a shitload of money, sure. But the very next day after getting fired was I still made like $75 fixing his computer. And it's like, okay, that was a message to me that traditional employment, if that's not my what I'm supposed to be doing, maybe I'm supposed to be doing this, you know, self-employed path. And so a lot of these things that are now becoming mainstream, I can literally look most people in the eye and say, yeah, I did it before it was cool. I was on sites like Work Market and On Force and Field Nation, taking work orders, going on site, doing field work for tech companies, the kind of work that I wanted to do. And I would have gladly at that phase traded a lot of, you know, a lot of things that I didn't have just to have a shot at having a job and actually advancing my career, because there's there's only so far that you can go with certain types of freelancing. You'll plateau very quickly after 2 or 3 years doing field work, and that's because at some point in time the work orders all become the same things that you're always doing. It's never things that require you to really think too hard. Like, that's just wiring and fixing things, the same things all the time. Forever doing that doesn't necessarily look that good on your resume, because, it just doesn't. Oh, forever. That's the whole thing. Just the trade itself can make you a lot of money. Maybe not a lot of money, but make you good money. Like, like if you're a plumber, depending on where you live, you could be making 80, $90,000, 70 to $90,000 easy in a lot of places in the U.S., which automatically puts you right where, above a lot of people. You're upper, well, you're still middle class, and so you can make good money doing that. And then you turn around and you embrace social media, which hasn't made me a dime yet, but you know, yeah, like there's so many opportunities. You don't have to go to college anymore. You can literally go online and learn. You can join a union, and they'll train you that trade. That's how most people start off as electricians, is they join a union, and you just play by the rules, and you've got a job, and you're going to learn on the job, and they're going to put you through training, like all of this. Like you will learn how to do that, and it has a much better ROI than going to college, especially especially in tech. Things are changing so fast that by the time somebody gets that degree at the end of 4 years, or even a 2 year associate's degree, half that stuff might not even be relevant anymore. Um, like case in point, when I went to college, like when I started college, the server Windows Server 2003 was what I had learned on, but 2008 had come out by the time I was finishing up or just out, and it's like, oh, so what I just got done studying for the last 2 years doesn't even matter anymore, because now they're going to want somebody that knows 2008, and I either go into more debt and take a class about it, or I learn it myself, and or just wing it and convince people that know less than me that no, I can learn it. But sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. But yeah, I'm all for the trades. It's really good. Yes, that's exactly what I was saying. That's how you piss off liberals. You say, "Make America great again." Okay, let me talk about that because I noticed this too. I went through a, you know, the only college I have is an associate's degree in networking. And so 2 years of college, I was actually there for 2.5 because I changed majors after the first semester. But they like the class was decent. It was a little better then than things are now because things were moving pretty quick back then too, but not like it is now. My The things that I learned back then actually were still relevant for about 5 years. Even Windows Server 2003, because when a company when Microsoft releases it on a certain date, prior to that, you could have the day before, you could have a company that just deployed a new server all through that, and those servers are going to have X amount of years for lifespan, and because servers are expensive, they may be trying to get 5 to 8 years out of a server depending on the size of the organization or longer. Some of these legacy applications wind up being servers that are used for 10, 15, 20 years or more. I've seen that too, especially like with in telecom. I was in an AT&T data center a couple times when I was doing contract work, and they absolutely used some of the best stuff from the mid to late 90s still in use, at least as of 3 years ago when I was there. And it's because to support legacy technologies that they can't just get rid of, which at the time, the explanation to me had to do with landline service because we want to disband landlines, but there's so many reasons why we can't. And it usually has to do with the rural areas, so that's why AT&T and T and Verizon and all these companies that also operate cell phone companies are busting ass to raise that coverage, to expand it to all these places that typically have to have a landline just to be able to have anything. So these are people that are lucky to get DSL, and most of us should know how crappy DSL is. Okay, so a couple things there. Yes, so when I went to college, I was fortunate enough I didn't rack up any debt. And I knew that even then that there were people racking up debt that they would play hell finding. Mind you, around the time that I mean, to put something into perspective, when I was in um, college, Katrina happened. I remember that one morning I was in the cafeteria before classes, and this was on the news because we had TVs. We were watching, it was the cafeteria, and it was actually wild because there was a row of like a couple rows of computers along a back wall by the TVs too, and a lot of us were on there playing RuneScape. So, but yeah, so back then was right around when the economy was starting to tank when we entered that recession in 2008, because in 2007 was my last year of college. So yeah, once 2008 took effect, um, the federal aid that I was able to get before wasn't happening anymore. They had so much more restrictions. I couldn't get approved for any more. Um, I also knew that I had reached a point in my life where I just wanted to work and make money. I was tired of going to school. I had felt like mentally I had hit a wall, like my brain was full, and I was ready to stop going to school. I was ready to stop being a student, and I wanted to, work and make money. And that's honestly why I haven't been back, because everything I've learned since then, I don't need to go to college to learn. I showed you. You don't have to do that. And then AI. AI. That's why I stopped it at the AI before they got too deep in the AI, and he's already, talking about things that AI can't replace. Um, I don't know if you know this, but AI hasn't achieved yet what they call artificial general intelligence, AGI for short. And what that means is if an AI is considered to have achieved AGI, it is as intelligent as a human being. It can make decisions, it can learn, it can teach, it can talk, it can do all sorts of things in a way that is equal to or greater than to the cognitive ability of a human being. What we have right now is not that. What we have is what's called large language models, which it I'm not an expert on it, but it basically reduces everything down to math equations, weighing things out, and just trying to figure out. Because if there's one thing computers are good at, it's doing calculations and processing large amounts of information. So you can, in theory, feed an AI the entirety of the Holy Bible, for example, and then ask it questions about what you just fed it, and it's able to work with data like that. And yeah, it seems like it's really smart, but it's not. It just, you know it works with the data that it's fed. Oh yeah, the thing I wanted to touch, there was a video that I saw, and it was this guy that is a YouTuber, and I can't remember what it was or even when. Like, I think it was something I saw last year or earlier this year, but somebody was asking an older man, that an old entrepreneur, the guy was probably like 70 years old, and he had, I think he was, because the guy walks up to this old guy, he's like, "Oh, nice car you got there." It was something really, really fancy. I think it was a Corvette. It's like, "Yeah, man, you got a nice Corvette." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I got 12 of them at home." And it's like, so this guy, he's got money, and he sits and he's talking about, he's lost it all a bunch of times and he's built back. It's because, rich or poor is a state of mind. Maybe you have to take a job that you don't want to stay at because you can take a small amount of income and invest it in certain ways to start other streams, and you know eventually your money works for you and you don't have to trade your time for money anymore. But one of the questions that got brought up to him had to do with, how do you feel about AI? And you can say what you want about old people, but not all boomers are stupid or stupid about technology. This guy, his response was, all AI does is it replaces the mundane. And truer words could not have been spoken, because let's take a look at some of the things that AI is already doing. So people are already using AI um, you know, to write content. Um, it's okay to use AI generated content. And there's apparently a way to detect if there's a AI signature. But to me, it's like, the purpose of the website, if you're making website content or a blog article and your purpose is to inform, it really doesn't matter as long as the information's correct and the language is coherent. And if you're trying to achieve certain keyword density, yeah, long story short, even a human doing it is going to come up with content that looks a little artificial. Because if a keyword is coming up more often than what you would expect it to, then you know that that's SEO, and AI can write that for you. So in that context, it still doesn't replace even if we had AGI, I don't think it'll replace a human. Um, but what's happened is there's certain things that you don't, if you know that your job can now be replaced by an AI bot, if the only thing you've ever been good at was writing, news articles and website content and things like that, if that's what your skill is, then I could see why you would be a little concerned about AI uh, taking over your job, because there's still aspects of the job that the AI can't do. If you're a journalist, it doesn't make sense to have AI interview anybody, right? It's not going to be able to sit and think logically from step to step, planning out a project. Um, it can barely write code, even though there are AIs that flat out use code. Um, like I use LM Studio for AI stuff, and it's got one that it's just loading real quick. I'll show you. I use AI a lot. It helps. I don't like writing. To me, writing is something that I find to be rather painful. So let's switch to the AI. Yeah, so you can use something like LM Studio, and I got a few AIs. Like I keep one around here for, you know, for processing legal text. Here's one that I've used, DeepSeek Coder, and that has made code that's actually worked. The problem is it took me, honestly, if I would have, had the correct skills to just write it myself, I probably could have wrote it faster than trying to coax AI into writing functional code. But, when you can sit there and have it write something, you know, AI is not going to replace people, right? So while that's loading, let's say write a script that grabs the, so we'll just say we want, so this computer is going to handle AI slow because I don't have a real GPU in it. It's just a laptop and it's using the Intel Iris. So, you know, so Python, and you can use Chat GPT for this too, but Like, this is not going to replace a software developer because if you don't know what any of this means or how to read the code, the thing can give you code. It probably won't work. And, you know, depending on your computer's capabilities, like if I had a GPU, even an old GPU, this would have been done by now. But, you know, this isn't going to replace anybody's job. This isn't going to take anybody's, that AI is not a threat. A lot of people make the mistake of treating their self-employment like it's a job, like I only want to work Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And outside of those hours, they try to not give their business the attention that it needs or deserves, and then they wonder why they're not thriving. The people who have successful businesses who truly did start off with nothing are the people who put 60, 80 hours a week on average in the beginning and for many years into the business before they finally felt comfortable enough to start achieving, giving themselves some work-life balance, start hiring people to take on some of the extra stuff that they were usually doing. Because when you start that business, unless you're paying somebody else to do the work, you don't have an accountant, you don't have a salesman, you don't have a marketer, you don't have insert role here, right? It's you. You have to figure it out. It has to happen. Um, and the easiest way to get to that is to contract some of that work out to agencies and companies like an accounting firm that specialize in providing those services to businesses that are too small to bring those on, to bring somebody on full time. 18.5 million people, that's more people than live in the state of Illinois and a lot of states. So, yeah, just for perspective, that's a lot of people. That's like that's like a state and a half. I mean, arguably you could take 18.5 million people and it might be a couple states worth depending on like if it's a smaller state, right? Like and that's significant realizing that there are essentially entire states full of people that don't know how to do this. Because if you go to an interview for a trade, they're not going to, yeah, they're not going to put up with that crap. The reason schools don't do that is they have incentives and they have their own bias. The people who teach in schools, the people who or administrators and other staff in school all had to go to college. For them, college was necessary for them to achieve their dreams. And to them, they pursued something they felt was a good line of work. It's noble, blah, 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 blah. And, so you naturally want for somebody else something good that you have, right? So that's where the bias comes from. And then there's the fact that some of them have extra relationships with, and I don't mean like they're married to him or whatever, but that happens too, by the way, where they have other incentives to try and get people to go to college. Um, hey, if you can get 10 of your students to go to college, I'll pay for your family's Disney vacation. And they like there's money involved in some of this, so it's hard for somebody that only knows that got brainwashed into believing that the only way they're going to get their dreams is to go to college. They're just perpetuating the same bullshit that's been going on for decades, and college stopped being a good value proposition. um, I think it was back in the 90s, 80s or 90s, whenever, and this was before I was even old enough to know that this was a problem. So, um, yeah, it was like in the 90s, I was under 10 years old. But anyway, the point what I'm trying to make is like college stopped being a good value the moment it just became so expensive, and it just gets worse and worse. You wind up racking up all this debt for an education that's obsolete the moment you leave, the moment you graduate. Here's your sheepskin. Good luck. Now you got to go teach yourself all the new versions of everything. And you still got to pay us back, by the way. And yeah, that's one of the huge reasons why I refuse to go back to college. I don't care. I don't need it. I don't want it. You know, there's so many things I can learn to do without that college degree, and I've proven it. And Gen Z is figuring it out. Yeah, let me tell y'all about that. The most stressful things I've ever done was anything to do with running a business of any size, any scale. Like when you realize that you are alone responsible for your both failures and successes. Like you don't get to sit there and oh yeah, I just made my first $1,000 online. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, but let's talk about your failures. Let's talk about how long it took for you to get to that point, right? And a lot of people aren't ready to sit down and talk about their failures and the ugly sides or even dealing with the ugliness, and especially with the way Gen Z has this reputation for having been coddled growing up. I don't think for a minute that that 60% of these Gen Zers that are going to try this, and this is just my guess, I think 60% of them are going to fail and give up trying to have a business when they realize just how hard it actually is, you know, because you're going to be laying there in bed at night and you're going to be thinking about numbers, you're going to be thinking about sales, you're going to be thinking about bills that you've got coming up and you haven't made another sale yet. You're going to be thinking about how to get from that point, should I get a job? You're going to be thinking about all of these things. Now, and to be clear, there's nothing wrong with having like a good side gig to keep going, because I think what saved me on my resume is even when I wasn't employed somewhere else, I was doing other things. I was self-employed. I was pursuing things that meant that I was self-employed. And because I have a lot of strong self-employment history, that ends up looking good for some employers to realize, he knows things. So, but it also helps stop up this whole lack of, employment gap, right? If you're turning in a resume, and this happened a couple of weeks ago, company was doing some hiring, and one of the people that applied had like a year or two of no work, and you know and I get it. you know it was a woman, and she had just had a kid, and she had stayed home for a little, a couple of years to be a stay-at-home mom, and now she's ready to return to the workforce. And that happens a lot. That's not something that I would ever use against somebody in the hiring process. It's like, okay, cool. You told me the truth. That happens. I value that honesty. And that person actually dropped out and accepted a job somewhere else, but like the way she responded though, just kind of like, and this is why text sucks, because it wasn't really an interview, but it was a chat-based thing. It was on Facebook, and like I think she was actually offended that I even asked, and so yeah, and it's like, but I don't care, because I just want to know what you're going to say. Are you going to tell me something that's plausible, or are you going to bullshit something to me? And that's what I'm actually asking, because there are many legitimate reasons. Oh, you were in a car accident and you had to learn to walk and you couldn't work for 2 years? Well, I'll be so happy to hire you then, because you deserve a chance. And it's like, but there's a lot of people that go long periods of time without being employed, and it's because they choose not to be employed. Oh, that job sucked, and I just didn't want to find, or I couldn't find. They'll say they couldn't find because they won't admit that they didn't want to find another job. Or they'll go in, yeah, like there's just so many things that go into design, putting together a good resume and preparing for an interview. But the most important thing that I would say is, especially if you are just trying to be a stay-at-home mom, or a stay-at-home parent rather, because it happens with the dad being stay-at-home too. Sometimes, the woman, the wife, the mother, whatever her marital status is the breadwinner of the family, because maybe she does make six figures a year doing something, and the dad doesn't have to work if he doesn't want to, and that's between them. But so if you're going to be a stay-at-home parent, you need to be working on something, whether it's a YouTube channel, whether it's a blog. Maybe you get something like a cry cut machine, and you learn how to make things and sell them. You don't have to make a bunch of money, but if you do something that brings in money, um, then that shows that you are a self-starter. You understand the value of work, even though you haven't worked for another company, in traditional employment. During that time you weren't doing that. If you can show me that you were still trying to do something during at least a good chunk of that time, I'll accept I'll accept that in lieu of work experience. Okay, so you weren't actually just doing nothing those 2 years. Okay, cool. And and that's something that's really hard, because there's some companies, some people that do interviews that aren't so accepting of when they hear, these parents that had to do that, because I don't know why they had to do that. You know, that's their business. It's not my concern. And, you know, but you know, if you're not doing something on the side, um, you know, the side with the time that you do have. Because yeah, it can be hard to get a job when you have to be, especially if you're a single parent. Um, it can be hard to get a job when you can barely afford daycare. There's a lot of times because daycare is so expensive anymore that it's cheaper if one parent stays home and just doesn't work because 150% of what they're making, you know, at their job is going into daycare. And I say that because mom might be the one that hasn't worked in a while, so she can't get, excuse me, can't get a good job. And, but she lands something that makes minimum wage maybe. And yeah, all of that money goes straight to the daycare, and dad still has to put money out of his pocket to pay for daycare. And for what? That they would be better off her staying home. So that's why a lot of women don't do it anymore. And so, you know, people, and this is something that's especially common with Gen Z, they don't have, this strong work experience that other generations may have had. But to be fair, as a millennial, we don't have the best reputation in terms of work experience either, because we were the ones that had to deal with that recession head on. A lot of us were bright eyed, bushy tailed, just fresh out of college or finishing up. And oh, the economy's going in the toilet. Oh, that means I'm not going to be able to find a job. Oh yeah, 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 that's something that I would have to talk about in another time. But yeah, let's just say I found very few jobs for what I went to school for. Most of my jobs that I've actually had any success were all based on things that I taught myself, like my current job. I didn't go to school for what I do. I learned all this all on my own, either on the job or on my own, right? Nobody taught me anything that I couldn't have taught myself. And that's one of those important things with if you're especially in relationships and marriages when one person it does want to step out and do things on their own, the one that isn't should be supportive. Maybe dad works his construction job while mom builds up a photography business at home. I mean, he can still be supportive of her ventures and help her along the way and just make things happen and just be her support system because yeah, you're going to be so stressed over all of this, you know, you know, and anything creative is going to be stressful. Um, but like photography is a good example because clients get so picky and people play games with photographers all the time because it's again, this is something where technology has made certain things almost obsolete, and photography, uh, you know to hire a photographer at this point is almost obsolete because our phones take such good photos, and most of our photos are just going online anyway. They're just being stored on the phone, they're being stored on a hard drive, they're put up on social media, and that's where they live. And not as many people are printing their photos anymore, let alone caring if it looks like it's professional. And, you know, so you get, and it's the same thing with web design. There are so many tools now that you can use to build a website yourself. Again, WordPress, if you even have basic skills of WordPress, you can put together a website that may not necessarily look that good, but it would work for your company. And that's what I see a lot of, and it depends on where you live. If you're in a bigger city, people are busier, they value their time more, and they make better money. So you got a better chance at making about selling web design to someone in Chicago than say somebody out in the country, somebody out in the smaller rural areas where they don't have as much population density. There's not as many jobs. The jobs don't pay as much because they don't have to, because that particular area, some rural areas tend to have much lower cost of living because there's really no infrastructure out there. And so these are the people that are going to be more worried about how to save more money, because if I can avoid paying even paying somebody on like Fiverr, a foreigner on Fiverr that can do it for like, because you could, like I said, you can go to Fiverr, 200-300 bucks, have a whole website put together for you. Um, but if you call the local web design agency that's in town or the next town over, they might want 2 to 3 thousand, and so you're not going to want to spend that. You're going to be like, well, I can't even do a couple hundred for this, so I'm going to have to figure this out and put it together myself. And so you get a lot of that. All right, I don't have sponsor block on this browser, so he's talking about his wallet, and I don't give two shits about his wallet. Yeah, still holding the wallet. Now he's talking about other merch. Okay, yep, that video's done. But anyway, I think that's going to be pretty much a good exploration of everything. So, but anyway, it was fun.